I'm Shivani Gupta. I'm obsessed with small to medium businesses growing. As business owners, we take so much risk and we want to make sure it's worth it. I believe one of the best presents you can give yourself as a business owner is to be able to learn how to scale your people, your profit, and your processes. Welcome to Grow Your Business podcast. I'm Shivani Gupta. I'm your host. And today I'm going to be talking about how to manage introverted team members. Well, we've talked about introverted people and extroverted people for many decades now. And one of the things that when I come across business owners and leaders that they speak to me about is that they find it much easier to engage people that are extroverted because they wear their heart on their sleeve, they express what they feel, but sometimes find it a little bit more difficult to engage their introverted people. And so I wanted to talk to you about a couple of real life examples that I've had. I've had many, but a couple of stories that I wanted to share with you around what we did, what worked, what didn't work, so that if you've got an introverted team member or members, then you may be able to apply some of these ideas and thoughts into creating more engagement with them. And so firstly, it's really important to, recognize introverts. You can get some extroverted people that can be pretty quiet if you're talking about things that they don't get that excited about, but you're going to get them to express a lot more around that. And so introverts, generally, there's a number of personality profiles that are around. Myers-Briggs or MBTI has been around for a long time. You've also got the Big Five personality test. I also am trained in the Des Hunt birds model, which talks about owls, peacocks, doves, and eagles. And I guess somebody who is a lot more introverted would definitely be more of that owl personality, but sometimes also the dove personality, not because that they're not into people, but more across the fact that they're going to appear and behave a particular way. And so sometimes introverts are seen as people that would prefer to work by themselves. They don't speak up, particularly in group settings. The bigger the group, that's a little bit harder for them to sort of speak up. They're very intelligent, very considerate and thoughtful. They're pretty good listeners and, usually very intelligent, both IQ-wise as well as EQ emotionally as well. They process information a little bit differently. So when I say they process information slowly, I just want to emphasize that it's not because they're not great, smart people. It's just that they need some time to digest that information a lot more. And so when there's a new idea or an innovation or, whether it's new technology or whatever it might be, they want to think through that before they discuss it. They don't just want to be thrown on the spot for that. They like focusing on one key task at a time, and they don't love being the center of attention. So when sometimes in our small to medium businesses as leaders and owners, one of the things we're doing is when we want to say, hey, let's give this praise to this person in a big group, it actually makes often introverts feel a bit more uncomfortable. They prefer it in a smaller group or even one-on-one. And the same thing, if there's feedback that you need to give that's constructive, like many of us, we prefer that feedback one-on-one or in small groups. They might not have a large friendship group at work, but they have meaningful connections at work. And they believe that, that's really, really tip. And again, just as I'm giving these tips and sharing these ideas from my own experience, as well as what I've done in terms of training people, particularly in that model for now 21 years, each individual is going to be different. So I'm generalizing a little bit here. And I want to now talk a little bit about strengths and weaknesses. So what are the pros and cons in terms of that kind of person? So, when you look at some of the pros and some of the strengths that exist for an introvert, one of their big one is thoughtfulness. So they prefer, as I said earlier, to think rather than always talk, and they're generally pretty good listeners. So once they've had time to process the information, they'll come up with a fairly thoughtful response. It might not be a very long-winded response, but they will come towards that. They're also generally pretty good problem solvers, again, because they're thinking and using that to process the problem and then coming out with certain solutions that might be there. Introverts are generally also more self-reflective. So they know themselves well. They know how to manage their emotions. They don't have generally a lot of outbursts. They're empathetic listeners. They've got generally pretty good communication skills. And they can also, because they're listening and attuned to different things as they're talking less, they can also often be empathetic towards other people's emotional needs, and they can be a fairly calm presence when there's a lot going on, particularly a crisis going on. Introverts can also find that they can drain their energy by doing lots of group work. They find it difficult to jump back and forth in conversations all the time, and they want to be able to make sure when they're brainstorming, they might be quiet, processing, and then they may actually come up with that. There's always a debate. Do introverts make better leaders? We talk about great leaders are great listeners. That is up for debate depending on who you ask, but let's put it this way, that introverts are more likely to make better leaders. They obviously need other qualifications and attributes and traits as well, because they generally are that little bit better listener. And when the team is proactive and engaged, they tend to be able to do that. So how do we make, what are some of the things that I've noticed when I've had introverts working for me? Well, one of the key things I've noticed is we would do lots of different celebrations. So we would do birthday cake celebrations. We would do perhaps, a Friday afternoon celebration, Saturday mornings in different businesses. People will bring a little dish in to share. I had a very diverse team in a number of businesses, so they would bring in some food that they could share with the rest of the team, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the ways that I noticed was that my introverted team members didn't always enjoy that much social. They enjoyed a little bit of it. They didn't enjoy as much of it. And they preferred things that were a lot more meaningful rather than just having a cake for them and somebody crazily singing them happy birthday in the team. They preferred things that were very well thought out. So they preferred the sharing of food, or if somebody wanted to talk to them for an idea, they were very collaborative that way. So that was sort of some of my experience as well. So I just want to talk about some of the strategies that I, through some trial and error, ended up putting into business and into practice, and what are some of the things that I found. So more of my extroverted team would be very comfortable getting into debates and discussions where we actually using that debate to generate ideas, and my introverted people often prefer the one-on-one collaboration. So particularly if I had some senior people that were introverts, I would let them know beforehand that these were some of the ideas that were coming in, giving them notice, giving them an idea. They don't like, surprises. So giving them some time to say, by the way, I'm not sharing this as open knowledge, but I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be sharing this particular topic and we're going to be talking about it. So I'd love for you to bring some thoughts into the meeting. And that allowed them to process that information, that allowed them to think through some of the things. And then their contribution in that meeting was pretty extraordinary most of the time. I always, with my introverts, I talk about the importance of team. I know that we're all beautiful individually, and I often have used the 1 + 1 = 3 principle rather than 2, that when we work together in a team and collaboratively and use other skills, then the outcome is so much better. And so I've, for my extreme introverts, I've even used language. Look, I know that you've shared with me that you sometimes dislike the amount of teamwork that's there, but you've got to so focus on that in a team environment. Our culture is all team. We want to be able to make that happen. And there's lots of different ways of looking at team roles. One of the really good tool that I've seen is Belbin's Teams roles, where people understand, what they are. And I would often then have some one-on-one time with some of my introverts. I had one-on-one time with all my key leaders, but just a little bit here and there, just to coach them in terms of how to be a good team player. And it's not about being the most extroverted person, but it's about listening and contributing and connecting with people as well. So one of the things that I always think it's so important with introverts is helping them work at their particular level, right? So whatever level of introversion they are, sometimes I'd say, look, on a scale of, 1 to 10, where would you sit if 10 is extremely introverted and 0 is kind of in that middle balance between introversion and extroversion? Where would you rate yourself, rather than me rating them and actually engaging them in that conversation, around that as well. My experience has also been that introvert people, and particularly team members, have made excellent team members. I've really enjoyed working with them. So let me share with you and finish off this particular podcast with some tools that might help you identify and manage them. So the first, I guess if I can just call it the do's and don'ts, the first 2 is get better at they need. Work out also, one of the other do's is work out why it's important to have introverts on your team. Originally, when I first started business 20 plus years ago, and then before that, corporate land for 10 years, I preferred extroverts, well, probably because I'm an extrovert. And I thought, no, it's going to be great having more extroverts, not really understanding the benefits of extroverts and introverts. And I realized that there's actually a lot of benefits of having introverts on your team. And what do you actually miss out when you don't have them? They make less mistakes. So we want them to have a balance of energy. We need some introverts and extroverts into the team. The other one is to really look at your people's natural tendencies. So, for example, who feel comfortable asking questions up front, talking to them about saying, hey, I really need you to bring some of these thoughts that you have into the team. I think the team's going to really, really benefit for them, and let them do what they do best. The other do is to make sure that there's a safe environment for introverts to be able to speak up, whether you use things like ground rules, which I do, or operating styles, or our values and behaviours, setting them up front in front of each meeting. No idea is a bad one. And that also often encourages the introverts to feel safe and speak up as well. I often also change some of my communications, same message, but I will deliver that message a little bit differently I would to an introvert than I would to an extrovert. So I don't disturb them always in the middle of it. I don't use them for sounding boards all the time, or I leave the idea with them and getting them to actually come up with that. I encourage them to get some training done on specific skills that they might need, especially helping with some of the personality styles really helped it. They love learning and understanding their strengths and weaknesses, as well as all the strengths and weaknesses of others, and also helping them achieve some of their own personal goals. Some of the things that I've really learned, some through trial and error, some the hard way, is being a bit more patient, because I move at a relatively ferocious pace. I sometimes expect all my introverts to, when I have a child that's more of an introvert. So just slowing down, being a little bit more patient, making sure my instructions are super clear, which sometimes they're not. The other thing that I've learned is you're not going to change people's personalities. It's really about maximising their strengths and weaknesses, and really fostering a lot of that great culture that you do. Also, one of my things that didn't work so well was I actually pushed one of my introverts into the limelight. I just thought it'd be fantastic. She was doing so well, and she got the Employee of the Month. We did a bit of a hoo-ha about it. I called it, I think I called it my Quiet Achiever when I did my presentation to her, and she was really embarrassed. And she came up to me afterwards, really that embarrassment had turned into a bit of anger, going, please don't ever do that to me ever again. I'm so happy to be acknowledged. I don't need it. And she felt really embarrassed about the fact that I'd pulled her and made this song and dance about it. So I learned some lessons. It's not that we don't want to do that, but we just need to be a bit more careful as business leaders and owners in terms of being able to, do that. So in conclusion, I just want to talk about the fact that when you're managing introverts, our responsibility as a business leader and owner is to really help them boost their confidence and their comfort levels and their safety levels, so we can really get the best out of them. And one of the things is to really help them understand their personality styles, for the introverts and the extroverts, because then they can learn to work through each one's strengths and weaknesses. I so appreciate you tuning in. If you could take a moment to rate the podcast, I would so appreciate it, and look forward to speaking to you more about how you can grow your business. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Shivani Gupta, and you've been listening to the Grow Your Business podcast. I hope you got one idea that you can think about, or perhaps even implement straight away in your business. Thank you for listening. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn under Ask Shivani. Remember, I call it Ask Shivani, so please send me your questions that I can address in this podcast for you. And I would also so appreciate if you went to the Apple Podcast to rate and review this podcast.